Alexander Moretti had destroyed 3 marriages without ever raising his hand in violence. He stood motionless in his Milan penthouse, the city sprawling before him like a kingdom he commanded but could never truly hold. The divorce papers felt weightless in his fingers, the 3rd set in 6 years. Sofia Romano's final words still burned in his memory. "You're impossible to satisfy, Alexander. No woman ever will be." He turned from the floor-to-ceiling windows and let the papers drop into the fireplace. Flames consumed the formal dissolution of intimacy, expectation, and inevitable disappointment. Alexander had believed himself untouchable, a man whose presence commanded both fear and desire. Yet the ache of failure lingered, invisible but relentless. Then came the letter. His grandmother, Donna Isabella Moretti, had arranged a marriage. He barely glanced at the formal announcement before his eyes caught the name, Elena Rossi. No social connections, no influential family, no wealth or leverage, just a quiet, unknown woman who, by decree alone, was about to enter his dangerous world. Elena Rossi, 26, lived quietly in a modest apartment in Milan's outskirts, working as a bookstore manager. She had always existed on the periphery, careful not to draw attention, overlooked by society, underestimated by everyone. The idea of becoming the bride of a feared business magnate with rumored underworld connections was absurd, surreal, and terrifying. Yet beneath that fear, a spark of determination flickered. Finally, an opportunity to write her own story, to step into a life she had never dared imagine. The wedding was impeccably orchestrated, a grand cathedral in Milan, gilded and echoing with quiet reverence. Alexander's black tuxedo was tailored like armor, his expression unreadable. Elena, in a cream gown of simple elegance, felt the gaze of the entire Moretti family and their powerful associates. Her pulse raced, but she stood straight, meeting Alexander's eyes without shrinking or yielding. Their first interaction was brief but searing. Alexander offered a restrained kiss, the lightest touch, but it carried a weight of intensity that made Elena's chest tighten. She understood instantly. She was not merely entering a marriage. She was entering a storm that could either crush her or awaken something equally powerful inside herself. Days passed in the Moretti estate in near silence, punctuated only by small, deliberate gestures. Alexander's watchful glances, the occasional brush of his hand against hers in passing, a door held open longer than necessary. Elena learned to navigate his world with quiet confidence, speaking only when she had reason to be heard, observing when silence was safer. But even in those silences, Alexander noticed, and in noticing, his curiosity grew. No woman had ever stood before him with such calm defiance. No woman had dared to meet his intensity without flinching. The estate felt impossibly large to Elena, a labyrinth of marble floors, towering windows, and crystal chandeliers. Each step echoed, reminding her she was an outsider in a world she had never sought, yet had been thrust into. Alexander's presence was omnipresent, even when he wasn't in the same room. His reputation, his aura, his intensity followed her as shadowing every move. He watched her across the grand hall, a glass of whiskey in hand. He hadn't spoken more than a dozen words to her since the wedding, yet the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. She moved carefully, deliberately, never hurriedly, yet never timidly. That, more than anything, drew his attention. "You have meetings with the estate manager tomorrow," he said, finally, voice low and controlled. Elena nodded. "I will be there." She did not flinch under his gaze, nor did she seek to impress. She had learned early that appearances could mislead, but presence could command respect. The first evening of shared silence stretched long. Alexander lingered in the library, ostensibly reviewing financial reports, but his attention kept returning to her. Elena read quietly by the fire, back straight, fingers brushing pages, lips barely parting in a small, unconscious smile at some private thought. For a moment, Alexander imagined her in a world of her own making, unaffected by him. Something strange stirred in his chest, curiosity, fascination, and a faint, unsettling desire. Elena sensed his eyes without looking. It was a skill she had unknowingly mastered over years of invisibility, being aware without being seen. Her pulse accelerated, a mix of nervousness and thrill, yet she did not look away. She would not let this man intimidate her. Later, in the quiet of the corridor, a small accident brought them unnervingly close. Elena's heel caught on the marble, and before she could steady herself, Alexander's hand shot out. His grip was firm, protective, yet lingering enough to send an unexpected thrill down her spine. She looked up, heart hammering, and met his gaze, a storm behind calm eyes. "You must be careful," he murmured, low, almost a warning, almost a question. "I am," she said softly, her own confidence a shield, yet her pulse betrayed her. He released her, but the memory of that contact lingered like electricity humming through the air. Neither spoke again that night, but both felt it, the first acknowledgement of desire, unspoken yet undeniable. As Elena lay awake in her new bedroom, she realized something startling. She did not fear him. She did not want to flee. Instead, a strange certainty settled in her chest. She would meet his intensity, and perhaps, just perhaps, he would meet hers. Somewhere deep in the estate, Alexander, alone with his whiskey and restless thoughts, understood for the first time that he might not be the one holding all the power in this arrangement. Morning arrived with quiet precision. Sunlight spilled across polished floors, glinting off crystal and gold trim. Elena rose early, dressed simply in a pale blouse and tailored skirt, a stark contrast to the estate's opulence. She had resolved to observe, learn, and assert herself subtly. Alexander was already awake, standing at the window with black espresso in hand. His gaze was fixed outside, but his mind wandered back to last night's fleeting contact, the warmth of her pulse against his palm. The first test came unexpectedly. The estate manager approached, flustered, speaking rapidly, about account discrepancies. Elena listened quietly, absorbing information, then carefully suggested a solution Alexander himself had overlooked. His eyes narrowed as he observed her, a flicker of respect and surprise passing through his otherwise unreadable expression. No woman had ever dared to correct him, to think independently in his presence, yet she did it with grace, with quiet confidence, without demanding recognition. "Interesting," he said, finally, voice low but charged, tone carrying approval and warning. "You'll need to be precise if you intend to survive here." Elena's heart skipped, but she kept her composure. "I intend to learn." The brief exchange set a different rhythm in the estate, a rhythm Alexander hadn't expected. Later, in the private library, their paths crossed again. Alexander had been reviewing contracts when Elena entered to return a document he'd requested. Their fingers brushed once, then again as they both reached for the papers. A charged pause, eyes locking, breath slightly uneven. "You are careful," he observed, voice husky with unspoken tension. "And you are watchful," she countered, softly, a small defiant smile playing on her lips. Alexander's gaze lingered, calculating, as if trying to measure the weight of her courage. No woman had ever met him on equal footing without flinching. She made him aware of himself in ways that left him both frustrated and intrigued. By evening, a minor blackout swept through the estate, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, panic threatened, but then instinct took over. Alexander's hand found hers, firm and steady, guiding her through the shadowed hallway. "Stay close," he whispered. Though his tone carried command, it was also protective. Elena followed without hesitation, their fingers brushing again, hearts both racing. When the lights returned, the silence between them was thick, charged with unspoken acknowledgement. Neither spoke of the contact, yet the energy of it remained. A first crack in the walls surrounding Alexander, a spark of mutual recognition and desire. That night, as Elena prepared for bed, she realized the truth. In a world where she had always been invisible, she had finally been seen. And Alexander, for the first time, faced the possibility that someone could meet him fearlessly, entirely without breaking. The estate's corridors felt unusually tight that evening. Perhaps it was Alexander's presence, silent and imposing, that made each hallway a stage of suspense. Elena moved cautiously, balancing a tea tray, acutely aware of the subtle watchfulness following her. Alexander appeared in the doorway without sound, as if summoned by instinct. His sharp eyes scanned her, noting the way her fingers gripped the tray, the careful tilt of her chin, the quiet confidence she carried. "Tea for me?" he asked, voice low, deliberate. Polite, but the underlying tone made her pulse quicken. "You seemed to require supervision," she replied evenly, hiding the heat rushing to her cheeks. He took a step closer, space shrinking. The scent of him, cologne, faint smoke, something unplaceable yet intoxicating, washed over her. Her breath hitched imperceptibly, but she did not step back. The tray wobbled slightly as she set it down. Before she could stabilize it fully, Alexander's hand shot forward. His fingers brushed hers, steadying the tray, holding her wrist for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. That small contact sent an undeniable spark through her, an electric charge neither could ignore. "You must be careful," he murmured, close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath. The words were warning, statement, and unspoken invitation all at once. "I am," she replied, keeping her voice steady even as her chest tightened. "And you?" she added softly, testing, teasing. Alexander's gaze darkened, unreadable yet intense. He did not answer immediately, simply observing, cataloging, measuring. A sudden noise, a crash from the kitchen, broke the moment. Alexander instinctively stepped closer, his arm brushing hers as he moved past. Elena felt the press of his body, the subtle heat of his proximity, and realized that every instinct within her demanded she notice it, remember it, not deny it. Once the kitchen was secured, they returned to the hallway. The previous tension lingered, thick and heavy. Neither spoke of it, yet both felt the unspoken acknowledgement. This arrangement was no longer merely formal. Something deeper, more potent, had awakened. The estate was alive with clinking crystal, muted conversations, and the soft hum of a grand piano. Elena adjusted her simple, elegant dress as she entered the drawing room. The family gala was in full swing, an event that demanded appearances, smiles, and careful navigation. Alexander stood at the room's center, tuxedo impeccable, posture rigid yet magnetic. Guests instinctively parted in his presence, their whispers trailing after him. His eyes, however, were not on the gathering. They were on her. Elena met his gaze briefly, a flicker of amusement and defiance passing across her features. Unlike the others, she did not bow or avert her eyes. She understood now that every glance, every subtle motion was a dance, one in which she had decided to participate on her own terms. As the evening progressed, she navigated the crowd with quiet confidence, engaging in conversation with the family's business associates. Alexander observed silently, noting the way she handled questions, poised yet unassuming, intelligence and intuition guiding her responses. For the first time in years, he found himself intrigued not only by her presence, but by her mind. "Interesting," he muttered under his breath when she cleverly countered an associate's thinly veiled attempt to embarrass her. The word, low and restrained, carried approval he would never voice publicly. Later, when a waiter nearly caused chaos with a spilled tray, Elena reacted instinctively, steadying the situation and diffusing potential embarrassment. Alexander's eyes narrowed, both approving and expectedly proud. When their hands brushed fleetingly across the table, a spark ignited, unseen by the crowd but unmistakable to them. Neither flinched, neither pulled away. That single moment spoke volumes, an acknowledgement that the bond forming between them was no longer invisible. A quiet corner of the ballroom offered brief reprieve. Alexander approached, carrying a glass of whiskey. "You handle yourself well," he said, voice low, almost intimate, allowing rare softness to slip through his controlled demeanor. "I have learned to observe," Elena replied, meeting him evenly, eyes locking with his, "and to adapt." He studied her, fascinated by the layers she revealed so effortlessly. Confidence, composure, subtle strength. No woman had ever approached him with such quiet defiance. For the first time, he felt the thrill of being challenged rather than adored. The estate was unusually quiet that evening, shadows stretching across polished floors as city lights cast golden streaks through windows. Elena moved toward the private elevator, carrying documents Alexander had requested. Her heels clicked lightly, each step echoing. Alexander appeared without warning, as always. "I'll take those," he said, voice low, commanding. She handed him the documents. Their fingers brushed, a spark igniting that neither acknowledged. The elevator doors closed. Almost immediately, lights flickered and went out completely. The cabin plunged into darkness. Elena froze, instinctive panic rising, but Alexander's presence was immediate and grounding. His hand found hers, firm, protective, holding her steady. "Stay calm," he murmured, voice near enough that her pulse quickened at the warmth and intensity. "I'm fine," she said, forcing calm, but the electricity of proximity made her heart race. The silence was thick, but their fingers remained intertwined, his grip steadying her in ways far beyond simple reassurance. Elena found herself leaning into the contact, unwilling to pull away, even as her mind screamed caution. Alexander's other hand moved instinctively to her back, guiding her closer, maintaining balance in the sudden jerk of the stalled elevator. Their faces were inches apart, breaths mingling, the air between them charged with something they neither could name. "You're not afraid," he observed quietly, eyes scanning hers even in darkness. "I'm not invisible," she replied softly, voice betraying a confidence she didn't yet fully feel. His gaze darkened, a flicker of vulnerability passing behind the mask of control. For the first time, Alexander felt sharp fear, not for himself, but for what he might unleash if he let himself succumb. Elena's bravery, her refusal to yield, stirred a desire he could not contain, and a caution he had never known. A sudden jolt made them stumble slightly, forcing him to press closer, chest to chest, hands bracing against hers. Neither pulled away. The silence stretched, each second a charged eternity, until the elevator hummed and lights flickered back to life. They stepped out onto the landing, fingers still brushing, breaths uneven. Alexander did not speak, only observed her carefully, as if measuring the impact of their proximity. Elena, for her part, felt a thrill of power and awareness. She had faced the storm without retreat, and he had noticed. The estate was quiet in the early hours, yet sleep eluded Alexander. He sat in his study, city lights reflected on the sleek surface of his desk. His mind replayed the elevator incident again and again, the brush of her fingers, the way she had stood unwavering, the fire in her eyes that neither fear nor awe could dim. For the first time in years, he felt an unfamiliar ache, the fear of being too much, too intense, too demanding, too insatiable. He had destroyed 3 women without a violent hand. The thought of losing Elena, of failing with her, gnawed at him relentlessly. He had always believed love was a game of dominance and control. With her, it felt dangerously different, vulnerable. Meanwhile, Elena lay awake in her bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The estate's opulence that had once intimidated her now felt like a stage. She realized she was no longer just playing a part. She was choosing to be present, visible, and unafraid. Yet doubt lingered. Could she survive this man's intensity? Could she withstand the force of desire and danger that followed him like a shadow? The next morning brought the first quiet confrontation. Alexander found her in the library, reviewing documents for a charity initiative the Morettis were sponsoring. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. "You did not flinch yesterday," he said, voice low. "You could have. Most would have." Elena looked up, steady and unwavering. I didn't because I am not afraid of being seen. Not anymore. I am not invisible, Alexander. His sharp gaze softened slightly, a flicker of something raw and unguarded passing through his eyes. You make it difficult, he admitted quietly, almost to himself. Difficult to be the man I have always been, the man who destroys without care. You challenge me. And you challenge me, she countered softly, letting her honesty bridge the space between them. Not because I want to hurt you, but because I refuse to be hurt by you or anyone else. I want to meet you fully, entirely. I want to survive this with you, not against you. The air between them shifted, tension giving way to something fragile, profound. Alexander stepped closer, hesitant for once, as if testing his own limits. I've never had anyone like you. I've never wanted anyone like this. For the first time, the walls around him showed cracks. He could no longer hide behind fear, control, or reputation. He wanted her, not only because she fascinated him, but because she made him feel seen, understood, and achingly vulnerable. Elena, heart racing, reached for his hand, carefully, intentionally. Their fingers intertwined, a silent acknowledgement that they were both willing to risk everything. Neither had promised safety, but both had chosen presence, courage, and desire. In the quiet of the library, with sunlight cutting through tall windows, two people burdened by past failures and fear discovered a fragile truth. Survival was possible not through avoidance, but through daring trust and surrender. And in that surrender, desire began to bloom, both consuming and mutual, tender yet impossible to ignore. The grand ballroom of the Moretti estate glittered under crystal chandeliers, city lights twinkling beyond windows. Family, business associates, and social elites mingled, voices low, laughter measured. Elena adjusted her cream gown, every movement deliberate, confident. Tonight was no ordinary gala. It was a stage, a test, and a declaration. Alexander appeared at the top of the sweeping staircase, tuxedo impeccable, eyes scanning the room until they found her. The moment their gazes met, the noise of the ballroom seemed to vanish. His presence alone commanded attention, yet he did not move immediately. Instead, he let her feel the weight of his focus, the silent acknowledgement that she had earned it. A heated discussion erupted near the family's front table. Business rivals subtly tried to belittle Elena, questioning her competence in handling the estate's charitable endeavors. Guests leaned in, some smirking at what they assumed would be her discomfort. Elena's pulse quickened, but she stood tall, meeting the gaze of each detractor with calm precision. I am fully capable, she stated, voice clear and unwavering, and I will ensure the project succeeds. A pause. Then Alexander descended the staircase, every step deliberate, eyes locked on her. Whispers rose in the room, curiosity and tension filling the air. Alexander reached her side, his hand brushing hers lightly but intentionally. The contact was brief yet electrifying. You speak with strength, he murmured, voice low, intimate for her ears only, and I respect it. The rivals attempted to press further, but Alexander's presence alone silenced them. His arm brushed her waist subtly as he guided her through the crowd, a protective yet possessive gesture that spoke volumes. At the center of the ballroom, Alexander stopped. Guests watched, breathless, sensing the tension between them. He took her hand fully, lifting it to his lips. The room fell silent as he pressed a long, deliberate kiss to her knuckles, a gesture both formal and intimate, commanding and tender. Then, without hesitation, he captured her lips in a passionate, slow kiss. The world around them faded. Elena's hands rose to his chest, feeling the strength beneath tailored fabric, the intensity in his heartbeat matching her own. It was a kiss that spoke of desire, trust, and surrender, a kiss that erased fear and past failures. When they finally parted, Alexander rested his forehead against hers, voice husky. "I have never wanted anyone like this. I've never wanted anyone like this." "I am yours," Elena whispered, a smile breaking across her face. "Entirely." The crowd erupted in murmurs and applause, but they did not care. Their union had been declared, not through papers or arrangements, but through courage, trust, and undeniable love. In that moment, Alexander and Elena had chosen each other freely, triumphing over fear, family expectations, and their own past wounds. As the music swelled, they held each other close, the world around them irrelevant. Two souls once burdened by isolation and doubt, now united, intensely, irrevocably, and passionately. Alexander Moretti destroyed 3 marriages because he had never learned to be vulnerable. He had demanded perfection, intensity, complete surrender, but had never offered the same in return. Elena Rossi taught him what no one else could, that true strength lies not in dominance, but in the courage to be seen. That love is not about control, but about choosing to meet someone fully, flaws and all. She had been invisible her entire life, overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. But she refused to be invisible in her own marriage. She refused to shrink to make someone else comfortable. Together, they learned that the most powerful transformation happens when 2 people dare to be vulnerable with each other, when they choose presence over perfection, when they risk everything for the possibility of being truly, completely known. Alexander did not destroy his 4th marriage. Instead, he allowed it to transform him. And Elena discovered that being seen, truly seen, was not something to fear, but something to embrace with courage and grace.